Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the tier list for patch 10.4 AD carry. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton. Check out the rest of the offerings on the channel as well. I stream every night starting around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. We'd love to have you. It's a very chill, friendly community. I try to be as conversational as possible with the chat, so come by, check it out. Check out the rest of the tier list as well. I have a support tier list. I did an in-depth patch notes, and I might do another role tier list as well this weekend. We'll see. And then we also have in-depth champion guides, coaching sessions, topical guides, like how to macro better, how to micro better, all kinds of stuff on the channel. So be sure to come by, check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So I think that it's not going to shake up the meta too much what was going on in the patch notes. I thought I had a patch notes tab here, but they did nerf Aphelios a little bit, but I still think he's going to be up near the top. Let me just pull this in. Now, they did do a few shifts to other champions, so I gave a little bit of higher priority to champions that are going to be a little bit better against tanks. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that people are going to start playing tanks again all the time. I do think that tanks, in theory, will be very good, but just in general, people are very averse to playing tanks. Because, you know, they have this mindset of, you got to get all the kills, you got to do all the damage, you got to hard carry all these idiots on your team. You know, that's what a lot of people think. So I think in Pro, once this comes live in a couple of weeks, then we'll start seeing, you know, Pro people playing things like Sejuani, maybe Maokai, stuff like that in the jungle. Maybe even Maokai top lane. But I don't think that's going to trickle down, like, immediately into solo queue. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I do think that starting to adjust more towards champs that are good against longer games, tanks, things like that, ultimately will benefit. Now, some of the enchanters got hit, and some of them got buffed as a result of that because they compete with each other for that slot. So, like, Senna and Soraka are going to go down significantly. As I predicted in the... in my support tier list, Soraka is down about 4 or 5% from where she was. She's at 48%, and she even got hot buffed where they gave her like 3 different buffs on her W, but it doesn't matter. It was still just such a huge hit. I mean, that helps. You know, that keeps her from being like 45%, so that's good. But it's still a big hit for her. And then Senna is definitely falling down too. Some people thought that was going to be a buff to Senna. So far, it hasn't played out that way. And I described why in the support tier list, so be sure to, you know, check that out. But just in general, it was a nerf to both Senna and Soraka. But as I also predicted, that's going to be an indirect buff to Nami, Janna, and Lulu because Senna and Soraka really competed with them for that slot, and they outscaled. Like, Senna and Soraka are 2 of the highest scaling ones, but Nami has some of the most base, or some of the highest base effectiveness. And so she can bully them out in lane now and not get outscaled as much because of some of those nerfs to him. So all 3 of those are up there. Look at that. Lulu, Janna, and Nami are all kind of rising up near the top. Lulu actually went up a lot more than I thought. I thought she'd be a bit sleeper for longer than she has been, but people are definitely catching on that Lulu's strong. So champions that have that benefit really heavily from things like Ardent Sensor, from things like attack speed as far as AD carries, are going to benefit from these changes in the support role. And then champions that, I don't know, that have a little bit of mobility too, to some extent. That's not always the case with some of these here, but you may not have that Leona or that Nautilus to protect you. Now the Nami and the Janna can peel off of you, but champions that have the like more utility about them, so champs that have like some kind of CC or mobility or ways to initiate fights, things like that can be pretty useful as well. In some of these situations. So anyways, let's get in here and talk about these a little bit more. Okay, so Aphelios, everyone knows this guy's just really OP. They did nerf him directly several times on this patch, but I don't think that these nerfs are going to be enough. Like, the core problem that I think I've decided on from my perspective with Aphelios is that his guns also apply, like, the abilities apply offhand weapons. That's really what the issue is, because you start getting some really messed up combinations that are just, like, almost impossible to balance. So, for example, a really popular one is to do, like, the flamethrower with the Gravitum as your offhand. So that I think that's how you do it. Or you might have the Gravitum as your main hand and do the Flamethrower as the offhand. I'm not sure. But whenever you get that combination of guns going on, then you can just like spray out these flames that can apply like the AoE to everybody pretty much. And it has just like an absurd range because you can hit him from whatever his normal range is with the Flamethrower, like 525, 550, and then the splash is like an additional like 150 or 200. And so you can kind of CC people with really high like probability that you're going to hit them from like 700 or 800 range. So you can zone people off of these waves with a tremendous amount. So it's not just that the guns themselves, like individually, are really strong, which they are. He basically has like almost infinite sustain with his scythe gun. He has insane push with his flame gun. He has really good dive protection with his turret, really good team fight stuff. You know, just the guns by themselves. It's that offhand weapon, right? Or like having in a team fight being able to drop the turret that's dropping flamethrower weapon, for example. So that you're getting all these flamethrower shots on everybody. There's just some of these combinations are really disgusting. Or the fact that he can ult and apply the gravitum to everybody and like CC the whole team, or blow everybody up with the flamethrower if you already have CC. There are just too many things that he's just too good with at the time. I think you can even Calibrum, hit somebody, and then just shoot them from really far away if you have Gravitum, and then like root them from, you know, a screen length away to help one of your allies catch up to him. So he just does too much. He scales too hard, does too much damage early, scales pretty well later. Now, I will say, in solo queue, his win rate is not amazing. It's down near the bottom, but that has been the case for champions that have been dominant and strong for a long time. I don't remember if Kaisa ever even cracked 50%. She may have at some point. But there's been a very long time where champions like Kaisa and champions like Xayah are really strong with people... What? Where people are very, you know, well-practiced on those champions, they can still take over. So I think that's the case with Aphelios. I think he's still just too strong, despite the fact that he kind of has a lower win rate right now. Not just in pro, but just for people who practice him. If you don't have good practice on him, then he's not going to be that great. But if you do, then he's awesome. As noted by the delta here. This delta number off to the far right of Lowalytics means... you know, how, like, what's the difference between someone who has a lot of games on it and what's the difference in someone who's just kind of average or just kind of trying it out, right? So if it has a high delta, that means that it has the potential to be really OP with people that practice it a lot. And a 10 is, like, off the charts. As far as the delta goes, that means that players that are really strong on him have, like, a 58% win rate. So anyways... I think he's still going to be there. He fits in almost any comp. He's just so versatile in the way he can approach the game, and he scales really hard, and he has really good just utility all over the place. Like I said, with his ability to root people, his team fight damage, his wave clear, he's just got everything. His ability to duel, like that scythe early on, if you activate that scythe and you get somebody isolated, it just does an absurd amount of damage. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be much argument for most analysts that he's the number 1 ADC on this patch. Not only for professional play, where it's extremely obvious that he is, with like 97% presence and 54% win rate, but just in the general population, if someone gets a hold of it that knows how to play him, it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like an uphill battle the entire game. And then the next one, which if you've watched my channel would not surprise you, but if you haven't watched my channel, if this is your first time here, or you haven't seen me play this before... I think that Cassiopeia is extremely good right now. And I think that there are a lot of tier lists that have her listed on there. So free, I guess, pro guides. Advertising here. Now it's 10.2. I don't know if they have a 10.4 tier list yet. But either way... Several of the guides, the Mobalytics, the pro guides, all of these things, a lot of them will mention Cassiopeia. Like this right here, they have her S- list on Lowalytics, but people never talk about her or mention like why that is or why she's so strong. Let me pull her up here real quick. So the thing about Cassiopeia is that she fulfills a lot of the traditional roles of AD carry, but it's a lot of magic damage, which is really nice to balance out team comps where you have a lot of AD, which has been very prevalent. That might change a little bit if we get some more tanks, like in the jungle. We see the Sejuanis, the Zacs, the Malachi, stuff like that. But you're still seeing quite a few, almost all the major top laners are AD carries, or like AD centric type of champions, and then even some of the mid laners are as well too. So if you have one of those like 2 or 3 AD champions in your solo lanes and in your jungle, then having an AP bottom can be pretty nice. Now once again, demographics changing, but that has been what's made her strong since the beginning of the season. So she does really high sustained damage, which is great. and she shreds dragons, shreds barons really quickly. And for me personally, I think if you're on a Smurf account or something, which is a little bit different, or even if you're in lower elo and not necessarily Smurfing, the fact that she could start clearing, like, wave clearing stuff super fast, including the jungle, is really, really powerful in the mid to late game. Because a lot of times what'll happen in jungle situations, kind of in the mid to late game, is, especially if you're in, like, gold, silver, things like that, is people won't, like, optimally clear their jungle. So you might have your jungler just go, like, invade their top side jungle and take all of their camps on top, while the enemy jungler is just camping you on the bot lane, and your jungler hasn't cleared your bot jungle. Well, what you can do, you know, if it's not really safe for you to farm, like, your lane, you can walk over there and grab the Gromp or grab the Golems or whatever, and you can do that really quickly, and they'll think that you backed, and then they'll push into your tower, and that's where you can farm safely a lot of times. So, just kind of gives you an option with Cassiopeia as someone who can do that. Now, other AD carries can do that as well, but she does clear that stuff really, really quickly, especially once you get your Archangels. So the fact that she can just, like, path through the jungle a lot of times on your way to stuff and just, like, mow down the jungle camps while you're moving to another lane to go farm is really, really nice. So that's good. Shreds Dragon, shreds Baron, shreds through jungle camps. Can push waves really easily. And then she has that utility, too, that I was just kind of mentioning is really, like, pretty valuable right now in the AD carry slot, because a lot of times when you play AD carry, you're going to be underleveled, you're going to be camped. You got to coin flip with your support, whether or not you get to play the lane. So just having some kind of baseline utility and ability to scale out later on into the game, I think is pretty nice. So she gets some extra movement speed from Noxious Blast that allows her to kite and get out of situations. Miasma is really good for stopping movement, and, you know, stopping people from jumping on top of you, which is really handy. You can throw this on the Sejuani that's, you know, walking up to you or whatever. Now, her thing might actually make I don't know if Sejuani is a good example, because I think her passive might make her immune to slows for the first little bit when you damage her, so that may not work as well. But against a lot of champions, it does end up working out pretty well. And then, of course, you have your Petrifying Gaze, low cooldown, really high impact ult if you get that stun, and that allows you some really good peel for people that are trying to dive you. This also allows you to make your own play. If you're good at controlling vision and really good at pathing and momentum, you can kind of make your own plays and get your own kills, which is something that a lot of AD carries might struggle with unless they're absurdly far ahead. But Cassiopeia can do this even if she's even or just a little bit ahead. Maybe even if she's behind, she can do this. So a great example of this is if you push forward with your lane, you just, like, power push, and then you path backwards like you're just going to recall, and then you loop around if you have a control ward, and you put a control ward in their forward bush, and you just sit there and wait. And as soon as they walk up, you just Petrifying Gaze and Miasma, hit them with your Q, and then just spam Twin Fangs, and they're dead. Pretty much, against almost anybody. You can sometimes even 2v1 and get the support and the AD carry if they're walking together, and you pull that off. So there aren't really that many other AD carries, especially kind of earlier in the game, that can do something like that and make their own play, get their own kills without relying on the support to get those kinds of engages. So I think that just gives her a ton of utility. As I explained before, she's very, very good against tanks too, because she does such a high amount of sustained damage, and you can very comfortably get penetration if you need to. You know, you can get that Void Staff. It's a lot less out of your way to get something like Void Staff, I think, than it is as an AD carry to get something like Mortal Reminder. I think the stats are just way better on Void Staff than they are on the others. I haven't done the exact math on it, but it just feels like it's less out of the way. Because there's not a lot of other stuff you have to get. You know, as an AD carry, if you're trying to get something like Mortal Reminder, a lot of times you're putting yourself behind a little bit, potentially against squishies, because you're not able to get your crit as much. Whereas Void Staff's still going to be really good against squishies. There's a lot of people, you know, out there that think, oh, that's only good against tanks. Well, it's, you know, percentage penetration is going to be good against everybody, even if it's not just tanks. So it's obviously better against tanks, but I just think that itemization helps her out a lot too, especially against tanks. Now, if they, you know, it is going to be very popular with a lot of these tanks to get Spirit Visage, so you want to make sure you don't overload on AP. You know, if you have an AP top laner and an AP mid laner, you may not want to go Cassiopeia, because if they can get Spirit Visage and just start stacking up, like, Adaptive Helm and Spirit Visage and, like, Mercury Treads, it will be kind of hard to cut through that. But overall, I just think she's really versatile. She has some great utility with the ult, with the miasma, great wave clear, at really high sustained damage, great combo with something like a Nautilus or a Leona or a Nami. She's fantastic with Nami. I do need to mention that. I almost forgot to mention that because the Nami changes, and Nami is very popular and very powerful right now. Right? She was the #2 win rate support, and she has over a 10% play rate. So people are definitely picking Nami right now. And the reason that Nami's so strong with her is the Cassiopeia Fangs. Nami's E can trigger that now because they changed that a couple of patches ago. So that means that you get a free slow on your E. And if you rush Leandries, that means that your E is going to apply the extra burn off of the Leandries, the upgraded burn, without having to get a Rylai's, which is very, very nice. So that is a very, very nice combination. So yes, she doesn't benefit a lot from Ardent Sensor, but if you do have something like a Nami on your team, it's great. And a lot of times these type of champions, they can get other things other than Ardent Sensor too, right? Like Lulu's not necessarily going to be the greatest with Cassio, although the extra movement speed is very nice off of the W. That is good. But someone like Janna, they can get a Shirelia's and a Redemption, or you might have someone else on your team that benefits from Ardent Sensor. You got a Master Yi in the jungle or something, so she can still do all right with these enchanters. Nami's the best one, but she can still function with Janna and Lulu. But she's, if you still do get some of those Nautilus and Leonas, and people will keep playing these champs, even though I called for it and said that they were going to lose some win rate on this patch, a lot of people are still going to play them. Nautilus is around 50%, 13% play rate, Leona's 12%. People just get caught in their habits and will just keep playing the same champs for several patches, even if it isn't optimal anymore. Which, those champs are okay. Like, they're not terrible, but I think that really the enchanters coming back have been the story over the last couple of patches, trending upward. Anyways, okay, let's move on to Senna here. I still think Senna's going to be really strong, and it's similar to Cassiopeia in some ways in that she has a lot of, utility. So if you get camped, if you fall behind early, you do have some options later on. You have your E, which is a very good kind of disruptor tank, sort of thing. Or it's like, not tank, but engage. It can be very good if you have your whole squad there and you put them all in that smoke to kind of just confuse the enemies. They don't know if it's, the Maokai on your team or the Darius on your team, or if it's you or your Janna or whatever. This causes a lot of confusion in fights whenever you use that smoke. So that's pretty nice. And then, of course, your W can potentially give an AoE root. You have healing yourself. You have wave clear. You have really good early game domination with your poke. She has very cheap items, so she gets to cheat the curve with Manamune, plus something like a Ghost Blade or Dust Blade. And one thing that I will say, though, which I'm not sure, we'll have to see how this plays out, I feel like she's not that great against tanks. We haven't really seen her go against a ton of tanks lately. In Pro, she has been, going up against Ornn a lot, which I don't understand why people don't just ban Ornn. He's flex pick. He's so strong all the time, especially in Pro. I don't get it. But anyways, she has been going down a little bit as people have been playing Ornn a lot more in regions around the world. I think she has a harder time against tanks. So I think for right now, if everyone's not playing tanks, then she can still be pretty good. But if people start picking up those tanks again, maybe not. And the reason that I say that is that she doesn't have a lot, attack speed's terrible on her. And that's usually one of the ways that you ramp up and beat tanks is you have a lot of attack speed and a lot of critical strike. So she doesn't have that. She doesn't have any percent health damage. She does hit hard, on squishies, because she does get lethality with Dustblade and Ghostblade, and Muramana does, a pretty good, base amount of damage. But against people that are going to be stacking up some armor and are going to have, pretty high health and regeneration and things like that, it could be kind of rough out there. So I feel like she's a lot better against squishies, although, once again, she hasn't been tested in a tank meta yet, so we'll see. But I feel like there's a possibility she could slip in a tier 2 or tier 3. But for right now, she still does have a pretty high win rate, and she has a lot of utility once again. So if you fall behind, there are ways to get back in the game. You have an engage, you have a global ult, you still got some healing. So I think that utility is still going to be pretty good in this meta. But, like I said, have a little asterisk there. Keep an eye out. If we start to see Sejuani and Maokai every game out of the jungle, or Zac, it might be tough for him. Okay, Misfortune is another one that I think is strong right now, but historically is not amazing against tanks, but she is very good in team fights. So If they only have like one tank and their whole team wants to group up and team fight, the Misfortune can be good. She's good if you have tank-like champions on your team that are trying to wrap them up, right? So if you can hold them together with like a Jarvan ult, or like Sejuani's locking everybody up, or a Mumu or whatever, then she's going to be very good, because just pressing ult, she can just carve through everybody. I doubt she's going to get Black Cleaver again. Back in the day, she did get Black Cleaver, which does help your whole team against tanks. It is possible you do that again if you have 2 or 3 AD champions on your team. If you have like a Misfortune bot lane, and then you got a Master Yi or a Kindred in the jungle, and you got some other AD top lane like a Riven or something, it might be possible to do something like a Cleaver again if no one else on your team's going to get it. Maybe. Because your ult does apply Cleaver on everybody, lowers their armor, and increases your damage by a ton. But I really don't think we're probably going to go back to the Cleaver type of meta. However, just even with the Critical Strike build that I think is still her best build, which is the Essence Reaver into Infinity Edge, into whatever after that, like a Phantom Dancer, she's still going to put down a ton of damage. She has great harassment early on. She's one of the best bullies in the game. She does have the utility too, right? She's got that slow with her ult, or with her E, just point click. Excellent setup for the Nautilus or the Leona if you have that on your team. Great for hitting skill shots, great for kiting. She has a lot of movement speed, so she can rotate around the map really quickly. She can afford to get things like magical footwear as her secondary, save some money that way, and still rotate. Follow your support with their Moby boots. Get there in time to mid lane to have an impact, rotate, grab scuttles, grab some enemy jungle camps. So just that movement speed is really invaluable, and it's something that a lot of people probably don't think about unless you've played Misfortune a few times. That movement speed does add up. And then she has a pretty nice attack speed steroid. People don't usually think of Misfortune as someone who sits there and just like auto attacks people to death. It's usually, she just presses ult and deletes everybody. And she has that option. But, her W, they have buffed it over time to where it's 100% extra attack speed for like 6 seconds or something. It's a really, really nice attack speed buff. So she can actually sit there and eventually hack through something like a Maokai or a Sejuani. Now, she's not going to be as good as something like a Vayne at doing that. But, nevertheless, she has that in her repertoire if she needs to. So she's got some versatile builds. Like I said, she can do the Cleaver, maybe. She can do Mortal Reminder and put the Grievous Wounds on an entire team off of that, which can be very good against things like a Soraka or like a Redemption. So that can be pretty good. So I think she's still going to be in a very strong place. She's the highest win rate traditional ADC right now, and she has just a monster pick rate at 27%. I think that's the most popular. Yeah, Ezreal's still at 26%. Those poor souls. She actually is the most popular and the highest win rate. So she's one of the few vestiges of ADC over OPness. And let me just point this out as well. Everyone's saying, oh, jungle's so weak, as always. Look at this. Look at how many champions in the jungle have, like, over a 52% win rate. And look at the distribution, too. Like, the pick distribution. Like, it's one of the most versatile roles. There's so many champs that have at least 2%. Just over and over and over again. You're not seeing any champions that have, I guess, at least is like 13%. That's it. That's as high. Oh, Lee Sin. Okay, so Lee Sin is the super popular one at 26. But there's really not like a lot of concentration in just a couple of strong champions like there is in AD carry. It's just, there's a lot of different things you can play. There are a lot of different styles of champion. You have kind of your hyper carry with Master Yi. You've got your tank crew here with like your Nunu, your Cho'Gath, your Zac. You got your fighters with your Trundle. You got whatever Shaco is. You just have so many different things, and they all have high win rates right now. So I don't want to hear it about the jungles, man. Because if you look at like bot lane, like almost everything has been nerfed out. All of the traditional AD carries, with the exception of Misfortune, who's at about 53%. You have a couple of champs at like 52, right? You've got your Senna, you've got your Ashe, your Jinx, right? But then it very quickly starts falling off a cliff where a ton of the traditional AD carries are all under 50%. Now, there's not that many of them, but, there are some weird things up here that have a slightly higher win rate, right? Like, with very low play rates, like Kindred and Ziggs and Veigar, but, ADC, I still think is one of the weakest roles, and I think those stats kind of back it up there. What is it, Rory? You having fun? But I digress. Misfortune's going to be strong. Okay, so one of the spicier picks that I have on here. Are you feeling spicy, Rory? You spicy? What's in your heart? Oh, you got a chalky in there. A little chalky heart, huh? Yeah. You'll go show Mommy? Go show Mommy. She likes it. Are you giving it to me?
I want to open it.
Oh, you want to open it?
See what's inside.
See what's inside. Okay. Good job. Now, let's leave Sadie alone. Let's leave Sadie alone. Sadie's trying to sleep. I don't know how old this bar is, Rory. You want to show it to Mommy? See, she's sleeping. Oh, be careful. Be careful, Mike. See, she's sleeping. Oh, hey, Rory, be careful, okay?
I would see up.
Why don't we just let her sleep? Sorry, we'll get back here in a second. We got a little daughter intervention here. Why don't you go show Mommy that heart? She's wanting to... She's trying to get the cat. The cat's like sitting there, tail's twitching, and Roy just like grabs her tail. I mean, the cat's really nice. The cat hasn't ever scratched her or anything, but I'm sure there's a limit. So we'll try not to find that limit, right, Sadie? Anyways, so the one that I think might actually start trending up a little bit is Kalista, who's going to be kind of my spicy pick of the patch, other than Cassiopeia. I mean, if you're new to the channel, or if you've been around the channel, Cassiopeia is not going to be spicy. You will have expected that probably up here on the list. But Kalista might surprise some people because I didn't have her on the list at all last time, and she has been like in the dumpster for a long time. She's been trending up a little bit. She calmed down a bit here, but I think she was up at 52 or 53% at some point. I thought it was last patch, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just hallucinating that. But I think she has been trending up win rate wise. Yeah, she was at 52 last patch. But a lot of these other champs have been trending down. You see, even last patch, like Senna was 53, Twitch was 53, you know, Ashe was 53. A lot of these champs were much higher up last patch than they are right now. But the thing about Kalista, you know, she's been a meme for several years. Pretty much, like, she's been really bad. But I think there have been several things that have changed about the meta that have opened up a little bit more space for her. Like, the thing about her is she is really high mobility, but she does delayed damage. She does not burst people out very well at all. And so that's the thing, is when critical strike 80 carries and like high burst like bully champions are strong, then she's going to be weaker. So that's what we've had, you know, for a lot of last season into this season. It's been a lot of crit strike champions, you know, a lot of assassins in the meta. It is people that'll blow you up in 1 second or less, right? But if we're going back into a tank sort of meta, and once again, that's an if, but if the damage is slowing down a little bit, we're seeing less Nautilus and Leona, right? They're still the most popular, or at least some of the most popular, the engaged champs. But we're seeing a little bit less of them, right? We're seeing the Lulu, we're seeing the Janna, the Nami, things like that aren't going to be able to hard engage and lock you down as easily. We're seeing less assassins overall, right? They're still there. You still see the Zed and the Talon, but we're starting to see a little bit more control mages come in. We're starting to see a little bit more of these kind of like battle mages come in with the Echo, the Diana, and things like that are moving up a little bit. That's going to create a bit more time. They've nerfed out some of the burst damage itemization in the game, right? They nerfed Storm Razor. Hardly anybody gets that item anymore. They've nerfed that several times. They nerfed the Crit Cloak build several times. So a lot of people are kind of, they're still getting their crit, but it's a little bit less powerful certainly than it was. So that's given her a bit more time to start coming online. And, you know, we're starting to see maybe some of the tanks a little bit more. The games are already extending, going a little bit longer in general. Now, I think historically the trend is that she kind of falls off later in the game. Which is true to an extent, right? But then she has this really high spike up like near the very end. But yeah, she's good early and then kind of has a lull in the mid game. But I think just the itemization is starting to favor her a little bit more. Now, you would think that something like Kalista would be really strong with like Leona, Nautilus, and stuff like that, because you can throw them in there with her ultimate, which is good to an extent, but you also don't want to get locked up by those champions, right? Because they really inhibit your mobility. You know, if Leona just has you chain CC'd or Nautilus has you chain CC'd, then you can't really abuse your mobility, right? Your hop every time you auto attack. That's what really makes her strong, is when she can use that kiting, when she can kite away from the Sejuani or kite away from the Maokai to an extent to create a little bit of space. That's when she starts to get like really strong potentially. So I think that some of those changes are starting to add up. They did give her a couple of buffs over time. It wasn't a lot, but they gave her a little bit recently. And the nerf to some of those other items, the crit items, means that things like Blade of the Ruined King do become a bit more valuable as you start to see more tanks. Blade of the Ruined King obviously is going to gain some value there. And just in general, I think she does pretty well into tanks. Now, I'm not 100% about that, but I feel like it is a good setup because she has a lot more time to sit there and just really stack in all of those Rens. And then she usually gets 2 lifesteal items as well. So she'll have Blade of the Ruined King, and then often as her third item, she'll either go Bloodthirster or Wit's End. And she can itemize into Ravenous Hunter as well, which is going to give her a bit more lifesteal. So they did give her a couple of extra buffs. Like, they weren't massive. A little bit of armor growth, a little bit of health growth. They did give her basically an extra 5% of the target's maximum health up front when you get 1 point in Sentinel. That was like the most recent one. And then 917, they increased some of her base stuff a little bit. But other than that, it hasn't been a ton. So I think it's just been like meta shifts. And she does have utility too, which is nice. She has kind of that roaming ward, which is iffy. It's not like... It really doesn't do that much, her little Spectre thing. It's okay if you put it through very specific choke points. It can help you scout a little bit. But she does have her ultimate, which is really nice for adding some extra engage, some extra peel. And then she has that mobility every time she auto-attacks. Like I keep saying, that she gets to move and reposition. So she actually has a ton of mobility for kiting, as long as they don't lock you down with a bunch of CC. Then she's difficult to deal with. And she has really high base stats as well. So, like, her base attack speed is, I think it's, like, almost a 0.7, which is crazy. I mean, Caitlyn has, like, a 0.56. Caitlyn's is very low, but that means that attack speed items are just insanely good on her. Because she has one of the highest attack speed ratios in the game. So, I think that's really good. And then her base AD is actually pretty high, too. I think it's, like, 69 base attack damage, which is really high, too. Now, it is a little wacky. Like, it takes a while to get used to her. She's hard to play. Like, her auto attacks only deal 90% of your total AD physical damage. So it looks like, man, that sucks. Like, she doesn't scale that well. But you got to remember that each auto attack basically deals this. The first one's going to deal this amount of extra damage. But basically, each extra auto is going to do 32 plus 35% of your total AD. So, yes, you're losing the 0.9, but then you're also gaining 35 after that. So, you know, it's really going to be like every auto attack is going to do 32 plus 125% or something of your total AD. So it's like a little mini crit, sort of, but not really, with the rend effect. So you pretty much, you stack up all of these spears inside of people whenever you auto attack. And just by the way, Hurricane does allow you to stack spears on multiple targets. So in a team fight, you're stacking each one of those Hurricane bolts is going to trigger Blade of the Ruined King on each person that gets tagged with a bolt. So that's a huge amount of damage, and it's going to be putting a rend stack in somebody. It can put up to 3 rend stacks per auto attack, which is a massive amount. So that means that like every auto that you're doing, and that doesn't get reduced either. And that's the thing. Like typically those Hurricane bolts deal a reduced amount of damage, and they deal reduced crit damage. So you do get that extra bonus damage as well. But like crit users like the bolts, but it's not as OP as like stacking Blade of the Ruined King on somebody or stacking Rend. Jinx abuses it because all of those bolts turn into little rockets. We'll talk about that here in a second. So Jinx gets some good usage out of that too. And that's just something that she can really abuse hard in team fights, is the fact that you're stacking Rends on like 3 different people at a time if everybody's clumped up. So that just does just a massive amount of damage whenever you get that stacked, because once again, it's Blade, it's the Hurricane itself damage, and it's being able to get those Rend stacks. And then you rip all of those Rend stacks out at the end and just do a ton of damage. So this is really nice for several reasons if you get really good with her. Number one, you can work around shields because you can just wait till the shield wears off. So like if you start stacking Rends into the enemy AD carry, you can just, and like Janna tries to shield, you can just wait until that shield wears off, or whenever you break it with like just normal auto attacks, and then you can rend and get rid of it. Or you can wait until after they, you know, just do like stasis effect or something. They use a stopwatch or whatever. You can wait. Now, I don't know if stopwatch removes the rend stacks or not, actually. I think they might stay in there, because the rend stacks stay for 4 seconds, and stopwatch is 2.5 seconds. So, either way, you can play around a bunch of different mechanics on people by waiting on these rend stacks, and it really catches people off guard, especially if they're not used to playing against Kalista, because they're not going to be sure just how much damage you're going to do with that rend. So they may not heal in time, you know, they may not use any sort of other like barrier in time, they may not use a lot of their defensive stuff because they may not know that they're in sort of an execute range. So that's pretty nice. It does apply a slow as well. I don't remember, the slow lasts for 2 seconds. And you do get a reset whenever you kill somebody with the rend. It rips all of them out off of everybody, does all that damage, and then you get a reset so you can start stacking the rend again and do it again to people. And a really interesting trick here that people will do is you can actually kill a minion with rend. So you can walk up, get like a couple of rend stacks on a minion that's about to die, and then start attacking the enemy AD carry if you're far ahead. And then you can rend and pull it out of the minion, kill it with the rend, and then it'll apply the slow to the enemy AD carry, and it'll rip their rend stacks out too, but then it'll allow you to start attacking them again as well. So basically you get a free slow on them off of the rend. So that's just like a little trick that you can get if you're playing with them a lot. Another thing that's kind of advanced is you can use your Pierce and throw this through a minion and then put the stacks on the AD carry as well. So like you can put a couple of rend stacks on, stack those up on like one of the like the backline minions or whatever. Throw your Pierce. If it goes straight through the enemy and if it goes straight through the minion, it'll carry those rend stacks and put them on like the next target. So you can auto attack, you know, that ranged minion like 4 times early on. Throw the Pierce, stab it right through the minion, hit the enemy AD carry. They're going to have 4 rend stacks on them, and then you can just all in them and kill them off of that. So there's a lot of stuff, and I'm sure there's a million other things that I don't even know about with Kalista. But I think that makes her pretty good right now. You know, she's got, I really wish this was a lower cooldown to like 120 seconds. But she has a lot of utility. She can run people down. She can kite really well. Her itemization is very strong for prolonged team fights with the Blade of the Ruined King plus Hurricane. A lot of times people do Wit's End as well. That's been the most popular third item. So that does help you out against some of those AP champs. And even things, you know, like your Sejuani, like your Malachi, all of that is still going to do AP damage. Like, it's a small amount, but it adds up. So having that magic resist is very nice. And then each one of those Hurricane bolts is also going to apply Wit's End. So that means you're getting even more on-hit damage, even more healing off of the Wit's End passive with the healing. And of course, the 50% attack speed is going to be great because she has an awesome attack speed ratio. And you just really want to attack as fast as possible to get those rends up. So I think that she has a very nice combination of items with a really good spike on 1, 2, and 3 items. And they're all fairly cheap items. They're cheaper than going for the traditional Infinity Edge Essence Reaver type of build. So I think that positions her pretty well. You do have to practice her, but I think that she does bring a lot to the table. If the enemy doesn't have a ton of assassins, and if they don't have a lot of burst damage, if they're rolling with 1 or 2 tanks or just kind of a low damage utility build, you know, they've got like a Janna plus a Sejuani in the jungle and an Ornn top or something like that. I think she could be a good move. And it's hard to deal with the rend stacks too because they can't get something like Randuin's to help with that. Like traditionally, Randuin's is very good against crit users, but she doesn't really crit, so you know they'd have to like maybe something like Frozen Heart could be okay against her for the attack speed slow, but nobody gets that item, so I think it just puts her in a pretty good spot overall in the meta, but we'll see. So she has been trending up. She does have a lot of potential, but you have to be really good with her. She's not like as hard to optimize as Aphelios, but she's up there. She's one of the harder champs to play, I think. Okay. Twitch, I still think is going to be really good moving down into tier 2. Someone always asks me, why, you know, Twitch, you know, blah, blah. Everyone always thinks that Twitch is bad and overestimates him just because he never gets played in pro. But he's always got a good win rate. You know, Twitch is almost always floating around like 51, 52%. Sometimes he gets as high as 53%. And that's the case right now. So, yeah, he is a bit lower than some other people. He's like at, you know, basically 52%. But he is going to be better in kind of like with Kalista. He's a lot better when he can stack up those poison stacks. He's very similar to Kalista in many ways like that, right? Like he's going to get Blather and King. He's going to get Hurricane. And he's going to abuse that stacking mechanic, right? The Hurricane's going to apply the Blather and King stacks to everybody. And it's going to apply his poison stacks. And he uses his E Contaminate to do this burst damage. So almost exactly like Kalista in that sense. The major difference is that he has, so he can't kite as well. He's more vulnerable to getting run down and killed. But I would say that he has much higher upfront burst because eventually he does buy crit as his third item with Infinity Edge. And he does a lot of very long range AoE damage to everybody. Kalista is much shorter range and the damage is delayed. It's not up front. But whenever he comes out of that stealth with his ult ticking, he can just completely delete people. So he's one of the highest like team fight damage champions in the game. He's very, very good. And then that invisibility as well just makes you, or just allows you to make so many plays in solo queue. This is sort of what I was talking about with Cassiopeia, where he can make his own plays. He can get his own picks, you know, in the mid game. You know, like your support doesn't have to be competent. They don't have to set you up. All you have to do is be even, or maybe even a little bit ahead. You might even be able to be behind if you take on someone else who's behind, which is find somebody who's alone, you know, trying to farm a side lane, that's pushed up too far, and you just sneak in invisible and just blow them up. And you can get so many free kills like that, especially at Golden Lower, because people just do not respect him. The fact that he could be invisible and he could be anywhere if he's on the map. So if you're really good at sneaking around, looking for those opportunities, you have a way to get back into the game. So even if you fall behind early, maybe you die once and you're down, you know, 20 CS in the laning phase, you can still get back in with just a couple of those picks later on. Scales extremely well with Lulu and Janna. Because he loves that extra AD. You have a great AD ratio on your Contaminate. And then Lulu's just amazing with him by giving out all that extra attack speed. You know, having her ult to protect him. Lulu's just fantastic. So, I think that he has a lot of opportunities there. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention with Kalista as far as like runes go, because there is a little bit of debate about her runes. I was looking at a lot of the top Kalistas, and most people are still doing the lethal tempo. The Hail of Blades did get buffed on this patch a little bit, but you know, that's really so you can like do a really quick 1, 2, 3 punch and then make a play off of that. She's got a 61% win rate right now in high elo. Just saying, in solo queue. But a lot of people are still preferring the lethal tempo. And I think lethal tempo is probably better because she wants the prolonged fights. So if you think about, you know, over 6 seconds or so, how long are you going to be, like, how many auto attacks are you going to be able to get off if you have, like, 70% attack speed versus the 110% here? So this is literally 3. So that's up to, like, I don't know how to calculate that exactly. But I feel like lethal tempo is just going to be better. Because this is pretty much going to last for 3 attacks. And over 6 seconds, you're probably going to get off, like, I don't even know, 8, 9 attacks with the extra attack speed. With the 70% or 80% attack speed. So, I think this is probably better. That's what a lot of pros are doing. But I guess if you really want to try to punish early and go for those really early kills, you might still be able to go Hail of Blades. It says the most picked is Halo Blades, but that's not like in recent memory. So you can try it out, see what you think about either one. I think they can both work. Halo Blades is nice because you get the double sustain off of that as well. So if they're running like a poke lane, you know, they have like a Xerath or a Zyra or something, then maybe you could go for this. You get Ravenous Hunter, Taste of Blood, Halo Blades, and maybe that can be a little bit stronger. I think that's a typo. I think it's supposed to be 8 seconds even when you're in combat. But I don't know for sure. Either way, I'd probably err on the side of lethal tempo, but you could do Halo Blades as well. Just as a quick note for Kalista. Okay, and then Draven I still have up here. Now, Draven's been falling, and Draven is not great against a tank meta with long fights, but he is good at bullying some of these other champions, right? So if you see things like Vayne, I think Vayne is going to be, if we start seeing tanks, everyone's going to start playing Vayne again. I've got her at tier 2. I think that if you're just really proficient on Cassiopeia or Kalista, they're going to be better against tanks, potentially, than Vayne, just because they do other stuff. Vayne is like just an auto attack bot. I mean, she does have a lot of mobility too, and we'll talk about Vayne here in a second. But my point is that I think a lot of people are going to start going to Vayne. She's always a popular champion. People love playing Vayne. What is she like? Well, she's actually not as popular as I thought. She's almost always, I thought, one of the top 5, but I guess she's number 7 right now in terms of popularity. But my point there is that Draven can bully those champions out, right? He can bully Twitch. Twitch is not that popular most of the time, but I feel like he can bully, definitely bully Vayne out. He might even be able to bully Aphelios a little bit. He can bully early Cassiopeia, maybe. So I think he has the potential. He can snowball really hard if you're good on him. You get a lot of extra gold. You do have a lot of burst damage, but flat armor is extremely strong against him. He doesn't have any percentage health damage. He doesn't have any true damage. And he doesn't have a lot of utility, right? He's got his stand aside, which is okay, but he doesn't, bring a lot of CC to the fights. He doesn't have a lot of mobility to get around stuff. And most importantly, he doesn't have any AoE attacks outside of his ult, right? So you're just going to be in a long team fight where both teams have a couple of tanks. You're just hitting one target, and you've got stuff like Kalista, Misfortune, Aphelios, Twitch. All of these other champs are going to be hitting multiple targets. So I think that makes him a lot weaker in team fights. So if you can bully and get ahead early, he is very strong. He can be very oppressive against things like Vayne. Or if you try to see people goofing around with Talon jungle or some of this other stuff like Diana jungle maybe, some of these potentially squishier picks, you can delete them. So he is going to be a champion who's better against assassins if they do have them, because he can stack up his Bloodthirster for a little bit of an extra shield, and he just does so much burst damage. He can go toe-to-toe with them unless they're, ultra-fed. He might be able to kill them before they kill him, potentially, because he does so much single-target burst damage. But if it does the meta does evolve into a, 5v5 team fight with tanks, it's already a 5v5 meta around dragons and barons, and games are already taking, 30 to 35 minutes. All we're missing is the tank component. Then he could be weaker, but... So he's pretty much if you want to go, if you have an early game comp, you want to go hard early, or you're just really proficient on the champion, you want to try to snowball, Draven can be a good pick, but you got to be proactive. You can't just sit there and farm. If you're just sitting there and just farming it out with Jinx or Twitch or Cassiopeia, any of these other champs, you're going to have a problem. Late game, most likely. Okay. Jinx is another one that I expect will rise up a little bit. Her win rate has been going up some here. And she's just going to be really good in that same type of environment, right? In the team fight environment where she actually gets peel, right? Where people are actually playing, Janna, Lulu, Nami, and they're not just going all in with Leona and abandoning her so that she gets flanked and murdered by assassins all the time. Then she's going to be able to come back into the meta in a big way, especially with Janna. She's very, very good with Janna because she builds a lot of crit items, and Janna gives that extra 50 AD. And so doing the Hurricane rockets with Infinity Edge with that extra AD is just going to give you just an eye-popping amount of damage in team fights. And then once you get one kill, as everyone knows with Jinx, it's just off to the races. You just run around and start killing everybody. Now, they did also make it to where when you get a kill or an assist on Dragon, then you also pop off with your passive. So then if there's a Dragon fight, your team gets it, then you can turn around and just start killing everybody. Or Baron, they try to come contest Baron, and you get it, right as they arrive. You can make a play off of that. So, that is pretty nice. She actually can kind of stand toe-to-toe, unlike someone like a Twitch early on. She can fight fairly well. She has pretty good poke with her zap. It does quite a lot of damage if you can hit it consistently. She has good range with her rockets. She can push really easily if you want priority for scuttles or dragons or to get a preferable back timing. She can push really well. So she has quite a bit of utility. Chompers is also surprisingly a really obnoxious piece of CC to work around. I can tell you this, playing Rakan a lot, Chompers is very good against Rakan because he can't jump around it, and they stay on the ground forever. So it's really good follow-up if you do have some CC on your team. You've got the Leona, you've got the Nautilus or whatever. She can still play with them. Or definitely in team fights, that can help you keep the Sejuani off of you, keep the Maokai off of you. a little bit. So she's got a lot of different utility and ways about her. She does take, so she has an okay early game, but she does take a little while to scale up a couple of items, and she is very vulnerable to assassins, to all-in champions. So if people still pick the Nautilus in you or the Leona and they get through your support doesn't do a good job of peeling, then you are probably going to die. So she is very like dependent on a competent support a lot of times. She can't do it herself. She can't make her own plays unless she's just disgustingly fed. Because she doesn't have like the mobility or a lot of the utility or like the playmaking ability of like a Cassiopeia in a bush. So I think she'll be good. She'll be good in a front-to-back 5v5 team comp where you have a support you can count on. I think that's nice. And then, obviously, if you have something like a Sejuani, an Ornn, a Maokai, something like that to help peel for you in team fights, that's also really handy. Okay, Jinx. So if we do go into, or Vayne, rather. If we do go into the full-on tank meta, Vayne is going to be, like, stage 1 that everyone thinks of. Like I said, I think that options, people are going to overlook probably Cassiopeia and Kalista that I think are also pretty good in those situations. But Vayne's going to be strong also. You know, if people are just going to let you farm off, if the enemy team is like picking things like Janna or Lulu now, and they're just going to let you farm, she's going to be really good. She's good with both of those too, by the way. If you get a free laning phase, if you can get something like a Nami, just to apply a little bit of pressure, just to keep the enemy off of you so that you can farm. You know, once you get your Blade of the Ruined King, and then definitely once you get your Blade and your Gensus, it's kind of off to the races. If they don't have enough burst damage to kill you, you're going to be able to out-sustain a lot of other people. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this, though, is that Vayne is single target. Right? So, yes, she can chew through a Maokai or a Sejuani or something like that off a Blade plus Gensus faster than almost any other AD carry out there, but it's only single target. So, if you're caught up in a 5v5 team fight and, you know, they have something like a Jinx and you're Vayne, and they're hitting, you know, like 3 people with their rockets, and you're only hitting 1 person with your auto attacks, that can be tricky. It depends on what's going on, but in 5-on-5, like clean team fights, your team could just get overwhelmed and out DPS by some of these other like really big AoE fighters. So that's always the threat there. But if there are just a lot of skirmishes going on and they have a low damage comp, you know, they have like 2 or 3 tanks on their team, and you know they just don't have enough damage to kill you. Or if you have an assassin who can come by and like clean up their AD carry, and then it's just you versus like their tanks and their bruisers, then she can be very, very strong. So she has a notoriously really weak early game most of the time, but she's very good at skirmishing. She's one of the best 1v1, you know, AD carries out there, especially once again if they have low damage, if they aren't just going to crit spike you with like a Draven or something like that. Then she can be very strong. So I expect Vayne to keep moving up a little bit as you start seeing more AD carries. Now, you know, if there is something like a Jinx, though, and you do have a mega tank that can just shrug off a lot of her attacks, you know, like the Sejuani or the Ornn or whatever, maybe even if she is hitting 3 people off of those rockets, then you might still be able to overcome that. Or if your team just spreads out a little bit or has a lot of, like, ranged champions so they're not going to group up, it could work. So, anyways, I think Vayne will be really strong. Now, Jhin is kind of like Draven-itis here as well, in the sense that, you know, he really likes to bully early. He likes to burst people out. He's notoriously not that great against tanks. He can kite them pretty well, but the fact that he has low attack speed and they're going to be stacking a ton of armor, especially if they get something like a Randuin's, it's going to be almost impossible to kill him. So if you start seeing Sejuani, Zac, all that kind of stuff, coming out of the jungle, it's going to be a lot harder. If we still start seeing some assassins, then maybe we see some Jhin, but I think it's going to be really tough for him. He was one of the people hit hardest by the Storm Razor and the crit cloak nerfs because he has to build crit. The lethality build on him was just kind of nerfed out a long time ago. So I just, Jin's like okay. If you can bully out the Vayne or the Twitch or, you know, some of these other champions early, he can be good. He can kite really well, you know, in fights if you get enough crit. But is he going to be able to hit priority targets and put out enough DPS to match some of these other ones in 5v5s? I'm skeptical about that, so we'll see. Okay, Lucian is another one that the last few ones here that I'll mention. He's okay. He is an early game bully, but he does have a lot more mobility than someone like a Draven or like a Jhin, so he can get in there and force plays a lot more. So he's one of the premier bully ADCs in the early game. He does have a little bit more, like, utility. Like, he can press the attack. He could go back to taking Black Cleaver, maybe. I don't think he's going to do that necessarily, but if they do have, a mega tank on their team and you have a bunch of ADs and no one else is going to get Cleaver, you do have that option, kind of like with Misfortune. So, he could return to something like a like Blather and King Black Cleaver build against tanks and maybe just kind of go for utility. Don't forget that press the attack means that your whole team does 12% extra damage to that target, not just you. So when you're shredding 24% of the armor for your entire team and your whole team's doing an extra 12% damage, and that's really, really nice if you have other sustained damage dealers, especially physical damage dealers. It can really help you carve up one of those Orns or Malakais. So he's okay, but kind of like these other champs that I've mentioned too, that these bullies that have the same problem, Draven and Jhin, he doesn't do a lot of AoE damage in team fights. He does have his ultimate, which is nice, and you can put that shred on everybody if you have Blather or if you have Black Cleaver, because any physical damage applies Cleaver stacks. So you can use your ult to just Cleaver up their whole team a lot of times. Not quite as well as Misfortune, because your little bolts don't go through people, but it still could be pretty strong. So we'll see. Early game bully, 5v5, not necessarily the greatest. He is very short range, and his AoE damage is limited. Obviously, his Q can AoE. Like, he has a couple of spots where he can, but by and large, it's not going to be that great. So if he gets really fed, it can work, but he's primarily an early game bully, and if you can't close out, and it's getting harder and harder to close out early, he's not going to be as strong. Dinger's another one where if you do want an AP option, if they have a lot of dive on their team, he can be really good. I think Dinger's one of the hardest champs in the game to play, like, optimally. Just sequencing your different spells and figuring out how to do it, like optimizing your turrets and their, like, attack resets and the little lasers they can shoot. Just hitting the skill shots with those micro rockets and your grenades. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on with Dinger, so I think he's pretty hard to play, but if you do play him well, he can be nice, especially if they have, like, a big dive comp. Now, his thing is, he falls off pretty hard late game a lot of times. His turrets, like, the base damage on him is nice, but it does start falling off pretty hard, like, as the game progresses. But if you just have a zone of control team, you have a really good 5v5 fight, you just want to take Barons or Dragons really quickly, he can do that. I just think that Cassio's a better version of Dinger. Like, she can push also. She has good anti-dive with her W, with her ult. But her damage just scales a lot better, and she also just busts through the Dragons and Barons. So I think Cassio's just a better version of Heimer, but, Heimer does have more long-range pokes, so if they do have things like Veigar or other threats where you can't really walk close, then Dinger can poke from afar. So I think he's an option out there if you're overloaded on AD and you need an AP champion in the bottom. He can work, but I would only do that if you're just like a, God mode on Heimer. You're just really, really good. Maybe you're a Heimer one trick from top lane and you just got auto-filled bot. Like, he can work, but it's just, you have to practice it a lot. Varus is another one that I think could come back, especially if we start seeing some more tanks, because he's really good in team fights with his ultimate. It can potentially CC a ton of different people. Now, Aphelios is kind of fulfilling that role as well, but Aphelios is going to be banned a lot. But Varus can do that. He has the long range. He has the engage that he can do. And then if he scales extremely hard with items, because his passive gives him a ton of extra attack speed, he's going to get Hurricane, Blather, and King. That interaction that we've talked about with Twitch, with Kalista, he's going to benefit as well by putting Blight stacks on everyone. And then he comes with free Grievous Wounds on his E, which is really nice. There's a lot of other healing champs out there. And he does have the arrow for really good wave clear and just some light poke and maybe sniping people out that are trying to run away. So he's got a lot of utility. He's got a lot of range. He isn't very mobile, so that's one thing to keep in mind. But if you do want some engage range and some utility, he can be good. Now, Ashe is another one that you could substitute in here. I tend to like Varus a little bit more. I think he scales better later on. Say Ashe is possibly better early on with the poke and the slow can be really nice. But I think Varus' itemization is going to be a little bit better. But it's up to you. Both of them are virtually interchangeable, I think. And then Xayah is another really good one, especially if you have Rakan on your team. Obviously, it's going to be a good setup. The longer, kind of the fight goes, and she can get more of those feathers on her team to just kind of rip back and kill people, that can be really handy. She is having a lot of success, or not a lot, but like some success. Last time I looked in pro, yeah, she's 54%, which is pretty good. 57% on Rakan. And, you know, some people on the channel the other day were saying, oh, well, you can't play Rakan without Xayah. It's like, well, they are paired together a lot. You know, that's what, 50, 64 with Xayah, and then Rakan has been played 70 times. So they often do come paired together, but they can work separately as well, potentially. But anyways, I think she can be okay. The itemization kind of hurt her a little bit. You know, she does like to get Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge, but the crit was nerfed. She takes a little while to come online, but she does have really good AoE damage in fights and really good sort of protection and zone of control with her E and with her R, so I think that she can be pretty strong. Then one of the last ones that I'll mention here is going to be Caitlyn. Caitlyn did get a moderate buff on this patch with the 10%. I think a lot of people are overdoing it because her ratio is still terrible. So she's not going to scale very well with attack speed still. So Zeal items are still going to be bad on her, which makes her itemization really awkward. She does get a little bit extra early on. Obviously, the 10% attack speed is nice. But realistically, like, attack speed doesn't matter that much in the early game because a lot of trades are just about really quick, like, ability damage. So attack speed doesn't matter early, like, in the same way for AD carry as it might for jungle. It matters a lot in the jungle because your clear speed is directly, like, tied to how fast you can do damage to the camps, right? Like, because there's not, like, a guaranteed, when you're a jungler, there's not, like, guaranteed income, right? Like, guaranteed, I guess, in quotes. When you're a laner, you know, you have a lot of time to try to farm up that, you know, those minions. Like, they all come in at the exact same time, right? But as a jungler, you want to clear as fast as you possibly can because the things don't go on a respawn timer until you clean them out, right? And so the faster you clear, the faster you get them back, and so on and so forth. So that's why attack speed matters a lot in the jungle. Also, you take less damage. The creeps actually hit you back. In the lane, they don't have to hit you back if you don't want them to, right? If you don't initiate a fight with the enemy, then the creeps don't hit you. So anyways, attack speed matters a ton in the jungle. That's why you might hear some people say, oh my god, this jungler got like 10% like base attack speed. They're going to be way stronger. But then someone like Caitlyn gets 10% base attack speed, and I'm telling you that it's not going to matter that much. That's why, just in case, you know, you never thought about it that way. That's what I think anyways. I could be wrong about that, but that's my interpretation of it. So I don't think she's going to move that much. I think she'll remain like 50, 51%, something like that. Like the big problem, yeah, it's 51.5, so she's doing all right. The big problem with Caitlyn is that people just have to be really, really good to play her. And it doesn't seem like that. It doesn't seem like she should be that hard to play, but for some reason she is. She does have really good bully potential early on. She's great when paired with other poke champions like a Senna or a Karma, or even Nami is pretty good. But you really have to put those traps down appropriately, zone people out, get those combos when they step on the trap. You got to learn how to buffer your headshots. You got to headshot, then like net backwards, and then buffer another Q and an additional headshot when they come out. So many people, like, someone steps on a trap, all they do is headshot them, and that's it. And that's just really not enough with Caitlyn most of the time. Like, that can work, but you really want to at least be hitting them with a Q and headshotting them. And if you have an open field, you really want to be able to headshot, net, headshot while you're buffering a Q. So there's just a lot of mechanics to her that can be tricky, and you have to dodge stuff appropriately with that net. You have to, like, foresee that they're about to try to engage, and you net backwards. So, like, really good Caitlyns can be oppressive, but the thing is that most people just aren't good enough on her. And you have to completely slam the early game because you're going to have a pretty bad mid game because she's so bad with Zeal items. So you can get Infinity Edge, and then after that, you probably still want to get Stormrazor. She's a victim of the Stormrazor and the Crit Cloak nerfs as well, kind of like Jhin. And so she typically kind of falls off. She has this, like, notorious lull where it's kind of like a U-shaped chart. I haven't really looked at it, but yeah, basically like that, where, you know, she's doing pretty well in the early game, but then after that, she kind of falls off a cliff. And then, I guess 50% win rate's not, like, off a cliff, but it definitely falls significantly, and then, moves back up potentially. So anyways, just a victim of nerfs to her items and just kind of the meta as well. She's not fantastic against tanks. So same deal that I said with, you know, all of the other bully champs in the early game is she does not have a very good 5v5 team fight. It's all right, you have great range, but You don't scale very well with attack speed. You don't use Hurricane, and you don't have any sort of like AoE contribution abilities. You have your Q, I guess it can hit multiple people, but it's not the same as Twitch stacking up poison on everyone, or Kalista stacking up stuff, or Jinx rockets, or Aphelios and all his shenanigans. Like, there's just so many other champions that do way more AoE stuff. And the final kind of nail in the coffin, I think, for why I probably wouldn't play Caitlyn most of the time is just Senna as a champion. I mean, if Senna's banned, maybe consider Caitlyn, but if they're both up, there's really not a lot of scenarios where you'd want to take Caitlyn over Senna. Because Senna's going to be very similar, long range, early game bully, but scales better because of her souls and just has way more utility. She heals with her Q in addition to pushing pretty well with it. She has better itemization with Man Immune plus Ghost Blade. You get to cheat the curve. It sets you up for scaling really well later on into the game. And she's got her ult for global presence. Like, I just think Senna is just a way better Caitlyn right now, and that's probably the biggest thing. I think that's sort of pushing her out of the meta a little bit. But even though once again win rate wise, you know, she's actually above Senna, I think, a little bit, right? Or not? No, she's not. Like, so Senna's about 1% higher, but like the discrepancy doesn't look like it's that much, and maybe I'm overdoing it a little bit here, but I'll just tell you from personal experience too, I'm just almost always disappointed with Caitlyn's. It's a tempo champion you have to crush with early. She's hard to play mechanically, and there's a similar champion that's just a way better version that's really popular and strong in the meta right now. I mean, I think that's pretty much what it comes down to. So it's not that you can't win as Caitlyn, it's just that it's a lot harder. And I guess that's pretty much going to be it. The last couple of champs, I guess I'll comment on. I think Yasuo can be good in the bot lane in certain circumstances if you don't have too much AD on your team and you have like a really good knock-up for him. If it's like a one-trick Yasuo player who's coming from another lane, I think that can be all right. These other mainstream champs. I think Kog'Maw is still just too vulnerable. If you want to do like the attack speed, like hyperscaler, I would just play Twitch. I think Twitch is just a better version of Kog'Maw right now. Or if you do want the AP threat, historically people played Kog'Maw because he does a lot of AP damage, just in case you were overloaded on AD on a team, and I just think that something like Cassio is probably going to be better at that. Now, I will say that, you know, he is extremely good with Lulu, and Lulu is a very strong champion right now. She's been buffed several times, so if you have Lulu plus Cog and you have some other protection on your team, he does have long range, and he massacres tanks, so he's kind of like what I would consider like potentially a better version of Vayne if you have peel and protection and if you specifically have Lulu. So there can be some spots where Cog can be good, but I just think he's very, very situational. Corki is terrible. Don't play Corki. He just doesn't have any attack speed steroids. He doesn't scale like that well with items. He's okay poke and utility. If you want to play him, he's just going to be better in the mid lane where he can get the levels and start like really leveraging his wave clear and his rockets to gain advantages. Talia was really hyped. That was an all-cap special of the week a couple of weeks ago. It's like, it's okay in the early game. It's a cheese pick, you know, for all-ins with Nautilus and Leona, but I think it's just got other problems going on with it. You just have to be extremely good with it. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. If you want an AP bot, just play Cassio. Trist is a notable one that I did leave off of the list. She's okay. I feel like she has to really snowball hard early or she's just going to be really far behind. Like, she does have really good resets. You know, if you do get ahead, you know, she is one of the most difficult champions to deal with because she can just jump right in your face and just reset the bombs and run you down. And she is safe in that respect, too, that she can jump out. She does take towers quickly. She does push really quickly. So she has nice stuff about her. It's just she really needs items. Like, she really needs that Infinity Edge. And then Zeal items have just been nerfed so much. I just probably wouldn't play her. Like, she can be all right. Her team fight's not that great either because she doesn't have any AoE abilities. So it's kind of like the worst of both worlds, right? Like, she can bully early, but she's not going to bully most of the time as well as a Draven or a Jhin or, you know, a Senna or a Caitlyn. And it's like she can kind of scale later because she has the attack speed steroid, but she's not going to scale as well as, you know, Twitch or Jinx or that kind of thing. So she just like doesn't have the team fight to match the team fight ADCs, and she doesn't have the bully to match the bully ADCs. That just kind of leaves her in this weird like limbo where she's like okay at both of those things but doesn't really excel at either one of them. So if you love her, you can make her work, but I just don't think she's amazing right now. Just do not play Ezreal. I don't know. If you're a god on Ezreal, you can make it work, but his damage is so low. He can kite out tanks, but you're just going to get overrun by any other ADC. especially in a team fight, is just gonna just massacre you on DPS. So he is a safe pick. He is a very fun pick. I like playing Ezreal, but his itemization is just like, I just don't think that poke's really in vogue right now. And a lot of champions are gonna have lifesteal. Like there's so much lifesteal out there that they're just gonna like lifesteal through a lot of your poke. So I guess if you do have a ton of carries on your team, you have like 3 other champs that can hard carry, and the enemy team has like 2 assassins and a ton of engage or something, and you just want to not die and hope that one of your other 3 champs can carry in the game. I guess you could play him as like an ultra safe pick, but I don't think he's great. Sivir, not amazing. They've nerfed her damage too much. She can't, just her stuff costs too much mana. She can't really wave clear. She has short range auto attack. So historically, she has been good in a tank meta that's like 5v5, but they just nerfed it so much that, and there's just new champions like Aphelios and, you know, just better itemization options on things like Kalista, Twitch, stuff like that. I just don't think it's a good time to play Sivir right now. And I think that pretty much covers most of them. Kaisa, if you're a god on Kaisa, she can work, but once again, the itemization is rough because she used to get Stormrazor and she was doing all right in the preseason, but that has been nerfed out. The tier build really kind of fell off a lot with her in the past, so, you know, she can work as a potential, like, kind of like Vayne, but I think if they have, like, actual real tanks, then Vayne is going to perform better right now. So Kalista's, she's not in a great spot, like, or Kaisa rather. Kalista in a better spot, but Kaisa not as much she used to be. So anyways, okay, that's gonna be it. Thank you very much. As always, I appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Be sure to check out the stream 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.